Joining us on the phones, our next guest, Republican strategist, Matt Mackowiak. Matt, good morning. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Chad. Good morning.
Well, we've got certainly have a lot to deal with, Matt. We had a texter earlier who was like, I miss the good old days when we were talking about politics all the time. And, it was just the political stuff going on. I guess, we'll stick to the political side of this, but obviously coronavirus playing a role in the politics of the day. How do you think the administration has handled it, and how do you think the coverage has been towards the president and the government's handling of the coronavirus issue?
Yeah, I'd start by saying I don't think the administration has been perfect. This is a very difficult situation, almost unprecedented in history that a pandemic would, come from out of nowhere and in 3 months, across the globe, and provide the economic and public health disruption that we've seen. Clearly, in the early days and weeks, the administration was not well coordinated, was unable to remove the bureaucratic barriers to ramping up testing, and I think had some messaging challenges. I think there was a hope that it wasn't going to be that bad, and the president didn't want to harm the economy by scaring people. That was a month ago, and that was just I would say for a week or two. Since then, since the vice president's been in charge of leading the task force, and outstanding public servants like Tony Fauci at NIH have stepped up even more than they always do. I think things are much better now. I think if you look at the ramp up of confirmed cases in the United States and the really strong steps the government, both at the federal level and the state and local level, are taking to try to limit the pressure on our health system, to limit community spread, I think the United States is handling it pretty well. I was just listening to Tony Fauci on Hugh Hewitt's nationally syndicated radio show, and he asked him, basically on the testing issue, whether the president deserved blame for that, or in fact, if the president deserved blame for any part of the federal response. And he said no. He said this was an impossible situation, entirely unforeseen, and that really no one deserves blame for this, that the government is doing the very best that it can. So as it relates to that, I think that pretty much addresses your question. In terms of the media coverage, this won't surprise your listeners. It won't surprise you. I mean, the media has tried to take this issue and use it as a cudgel to attack the president politically from the very beginning. And we saw this just yesterday with this New York Times editorial writer who wanted to take out of context the president's comments to the governors about going out and finding on their own as much medical equipment as possible, making it sound like the federal government was not going to help them. In the next sentence, he said, "We will support you. We will be behind you. But it may be quicker for you to try to find that equipment on your own." So, the examples are quite limitless, really. And the nitpicking, just the constant attacks. It's just amazing. At a time of a global public health crisis, that the media is trying to focus entirely on what part of this they can blame on the president. So it's unfortunately entirely consistent with what we've seen for the first 3.5 years of the Trump presidency, but it's nonetheless pretty disappointing.
Yeah. Shifting our attention to the debate that happened, Sunday night now. It was kind of an awkward debate. It was a much different debate than what we've seen in the past. To me, Matt, it came across that everyone knows that Biden's going to be the nominee, that even Bernie knows that Biden's going to be the nominee, and Bernie's just there to kind of harp on Biden for not being as far to the left as he is. Is that how it came across to you?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is that I don't know. It felt strange even watching that debate, given everything that's happened and everything everyone's dealing with. Right, just sort of a political debate at this moment really seemed almost irrelevant.
Yeah.
I imagine many of your listeners are probably even unaware or had forgotten that there are, I think, 4 primaries today across the country, including, maybe not in Ohio. It sounds like the governor overrode a local court decision and has closed the polling locations, but you have polls open, I think, in 3 other states. Yeah, I mean, I thought the first 30 minutes of the debate were interesting because both candidates were asked, about what the country and the federal government should be doing to combat the coronavirus, and it was a long, substantive discussion. I thought most of what had been suggested are things that Trump has either already done or the government is working on.
Exactly.
So I didn't feel like there was a lot of brand new ideas. The one thing I was struck by was two things, I guess. One is Biden really didn't reach out to Sanders very much, and at one point he was pretty tired of Sanders' nonstop attacks and kind of made that clear. And so I do wonder about whether the Democratic Party is really going to be able to unify once Sanders ultimately it becomes clear he cannot be the nominee, whether Biden clinches or whether he drops out. The other thing that I was thinking about is what terrible timing for Sanders, right? To be promoting a revolution, to be promoting Medicare for all, given the challenges we've seen in Italy, which has a socialized healthcare system, which is quite literally crumbling before our very eyes. Sanders has had a consistent message. He's developed considerable enthusiasm and fundraising and support from progressives and young voters across the country over the last 4 years. But boy, his message and this moment really do not intersect in a way that helps him. It was kind of striking how everything he was proposing, was not just radical 2 months ago, but now it seems entirely irresponsible given the challenges we're facing.
Matt, and I know there's so much unknown about how this coronavirus will play into the election and what's going to happen. If you're the Trump folks, and obviously there's the Trump campaign, whether people like it or not, they have to focus on the politics of this.
Yeah.
Everything was roaring. I mean, the economy was roaring. Everything was looking good for the president. And now you've got this, and the economy is not roaring, and the president even admitted that we may be going into a recession. Do you? I just wonder: are voters going to hold this president responsible for something no one could have seen coming?
Yeah, I mean, and I think one of the other parts to that is, I think there's two parts to that. One is, how bad does this get, right? And it sounds like it's going to get bad, or even worse over the next month. And the hope is we can sort of level out. By late April, early May, things start to return to normal. The question is whether you can get to a point where you are starting to have more recoveries on a daily basis than you are new cases. China has apparently turned that corner already. It took them about 2.5-3 months to get to that point. So the hope is that that's what we can do. I think South Korea turned that corner faster than China did. But to me, the second thing, though, is that the president was going to run on a strong economy, and it very well may be strong again by the third quarter of this year. It is not going to be strong in the first quarter and perhaps even the second quarter. The good news on the first quarter is you got a couple months of pretty strong growth. So we'll see exactly what the numbers are, but there's a chance we may technically be in a recession, even though a recession requires two consecutive quarters of negative growth. But by the end of the second quarter, we may be in a recession, and that's going to hit a strong argument that he's been making as he's been running for re-election. But I do think we'll bounce back. I think we'll bounce back quickly. I think the economy will regain strength once we get past this. And my hope is by the early summer, we're kind of back to normal. Not just from an economic standpoint, a public health standpoint, from a political standpoint too. The candidates are out there campaigning again, that our restaurants and bars and businesses are reopened, and that things sort of return to normal. There will be time for everyone to examine what the administration did, what they didn't do, what the mistakes were, what the lessons were learned that were learned were. I just think this does sort of interrupt the momentum, the positive momentum Trump had. Certainly, and the race has changed because of that. Do I think that it guarantees he'll lose? No. I think he's probably not quite as strong as he was a month ago. But a month from now, things may be very different.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, tell folks how they can sign up for your newsletter and tell folks about your podcast as well.
Yeah, the newsletter is called Must Read Texas. I know you subscribe along with 3,000 plus Texans. We take all the top news and from around the state and deliver it into inboxes by 9 a.m. every weekday morning in a clean, easy-to-read format. You can sign up for a free one-week trial at mustreadtexas.com. The most recent episode is with former HHS Secretary Mike Leavitt, who served in the Bush administration. He's also a former governor of Utah. We talk all about coronavirus and the challenges it's presenting. You can find my Mac on Politics podcast in the iTunes Store, on Google Play, on Stitcher and on Spotify.
Very good. Matt, as always, appreciate your time. We'll visit with you next week.
Thanks, Chad. Take care.
That's Matt Mackowiak here on the Chad Hasty Show.